Hello, welcome to my review of the Keychron S1 keyboard. For full disclosure, this keyboard was paid for by me. Keychron did not send this keyboard to me for reviewing, nor are they reviewing this video before it gets posted. First, what is the Keychron S1? It is a 75% low-profile mechanical keyboard. Mine is the one using the Keychron brown switches with a hot swap socket, but it's available with low-profile Keychron red and blue switches as well. You can also get it with an RGB backlight like what I have here, or just a plain white backlight, and you can choose either hot swap or no hot swap. Hot swap is only available on the RGB version. I would suggest the no hot swap version, and I'll explain more about that later. The chassis is constructed of aluminum, while the plate is steel, and it's supposed to have some foam on the inside for sound dampening. The first thing I noticed about this keyboard when I unboxed it is just how dense it is. Let me pull out the scale really quick. Let it zero out. There you go. Okay, so 0. Put the keyboard on. And I think the key switch. Let me remove that really quick. So it weighs in at 877 grams. Now let me pull out my Keychron V1. And that's 997 grams. So this V1 is about 120 grams heavier, but it's nearly twice as thick as the S1. You can see here. It really is a low-profile keyboard. All right, delete this. So around the keyboard, we of course have the keys up top. They're a bit mushed together, especially when compared to the V1. As you can see here, there's more spacing between these keys, especially around the F row and the other additional keys, and the D-pad is also, well, arrow keys is separated out. One of the things I don't like about this layout is that it becomes a little difficult to discern between some of these keys, mainly the F row, primarily the F5 key. On the V1, I could fairly easily figure it out because there is no key to the left of it. So if I bump into this, I would know easily. For this, I have to pretty much look down and find it. On top of the keyboard, we have the Mac and Windows key switch, so you can switch between Mac mode and Windows mode. I use Windows, so it's there. There's also the USB-C port in the middle. I personally would prefer it to be off to the side a little bit, but that's up to the user, or that's going to differ between people. On the back, we have these two rubber feet that can be removed. They actually come out with these by default, these very flat feet. But I did switch to the higher feet because I wanted that slightly steeper angle. My one concern with these feet is that because the chassis is aluminum and these are made of rubber, I am concerned that over time, if you're constantly swapping these out, the rubber nub here that keeps it in might wear out. But of course, once you figure out how you prefer, you should not be swapping these out. The other thing I don't like about these is that it only has 2 height options. The V1 here has 3 because you can flip out the full height, or just half height, or just none. But these are also not as durable as these are, since these are kind of fit into the frame snugly. Whereas these, there is a little bit of play. If you have the feet out and then you move it, it can cause the feet to break. Ask me how I know. For the keycaps themselves, they are a special low profile keycap made by Keychron. As you can see, they are designed this way so that you can kind of see the RGB spill out from underneath the keycap, but there is no RGB shine through the keys themselves. The downside to these keycaps is that if you want to swap something out, like say you remap this key, which is by default is print screen on Windows, to say insert or something, because you use the insert key a lot more often, you can't replace it to match what the new key mapping is, since this keyboard is programmable via QMK and VIA. But what you can do is use pretty much any other cherry style keycap or cherry stem keycap, since these are, actually I'm going to unplug this so I don't have any random key presses. Since all of these just use a standard cherry stem on the switch themselves. So if I also take the escape key from my V1, it fits properly, and it does actually actuate in the system as well. So, but if you look from the side, ooh, this is going to be very close to the camera. Can it focus? Barely, but you can see there is still some gap for the RGB to shine through, but not very much. And also, you might not be able to tell from here right now, but the LED is north facing. So for that, I have these YMDK pudding keycaps. So I take the escape key and pop it onto here and plug it in. The RGB actually shines through pretty well on these, if you're a RGB fiend. So there you go. So you can use regular keycaps, but I'd say that sort of defeats the purpose of having the low profile keyboard in the first place. And of course, if you change the keycap, the default sound profile might change a little bit, especially since those keys are a little more hollow and they have more space in them, so there can be a little more echo inside. One thing I don't like about the default keycaps is it's a cosmetic thing, but this F9 key really should be gray, like the other, so it does sets of 4. I kind of understood why they did it, just to keep the back play and forward button the same color. But personally, I think it would have been more balanced keeping the 444 layout, especially since that's what the V1 has. Sorry about hitting the mic. I need a better mic stand. Finally, I'm going to talk about the hot socket. So like I said, I would suggest not buying the hot swap version. Reason being is, well, one, these are low profile switches. This board will only work with low profile switches. I have these Kale box silent browns here, and they are a lot bigger than the low profile switch. And what this, and the shape of the base of it is completely different. So if I try to put this into the keyboard, again, I don't want to break anything too bad. Oh, where did that go? So if I try to put this in, it does not fit at all. So you can only use low profile switches. KO does make low profile switches. They're the chalk line. Unfortunately, I do not have those with me to test. So, but Keychron's website says gather on low profile switches only, so your switch selection is fairly limited. The other problem I have with this is that if you look at these standard sort of cherry switches, you can see there's a little nub right there that helps keep the plate or the switch in the plate when it's mounted. On these cherry ones, they don't have that. So one of the problems that I had when I was setting this up, since by default they come with max switches here, I swapped them out. I had to swap them out for the Windows versions. So when I was pulling out, I think it was this Windows key. Oh, it's working this time. But anyways, there we go. The switch came out with the keycap. And you can see there is no protrusion or anything to help it kind of stay in the plate. If you use the keycap puller like you're supposed to, this shouldn't be a problem. But because it can happen, and the fact that there aren't very many switches available, sorry, I just want to put this away. I would suggest sticking with the non-hot swap version and saving yourself the $10. As for the switches themselves, they are fine. They don't come pre-lubed like some of KO's other switches. But they do have a slightly higher actuation force or operating force, as they put it on their website, than the other ones. So these are 55 grams operating force. The KO Silent Browns I have are 45 grams for actuation, so when it reaches it, though it does have a 65 gram bottom out. And the Keychron K Pro switches that are in the Keychron V1, they have an operating force of 50 grams, but they do come pre-lubed. So those feel fairly light, but these feel a little heavier than I'm used to. I'm not quite sure if it's because of the lubing or something else. I honestly don't even know if you can take these apart to lube them. But yeah, they feel, but they're fine. They feel fine. They just feel like they take more force than you would think to actuate. For the stabs, they do not come pre-lube. I don't know if I can really catch that on camera. Let me try to enter key actually. And I don't want to do anything weird while recording. Oh, see, okay, so even with the keycap puller, you can pull out the switches. But you might be able to see there's no glob of lube underneath the stab, so they do not come pre-lubed. However, I don't really notice much rattle for most of the keys. Just make sure that's in and put this key back in. like this enter key that I just took apart sounds fine, but for the spacebar, there's definitely a little bit of a rattle. There's also very little pinging sound that I notice, despite this being an all metal keyboard. Overall, I like this keyboard. The lower height makes it pretty easy to use without needing a wrist rest. Unfortunately, it is not wireless since, again, all metal chassis. If you want something that has wireless compatibility, you would have to get the Keychron K3 Pro. However, that was only released on Kickstarter and only moved to pre-order on the Keychron site recently. That does have wireless capabilities. It has a similar, pretty much the same layout. It's just plastic instead. So it uses the other sorts of feet, but it does have wireless. And that's fine. That's great because this keyboard is fairly small, or at least the size is small. This one is a bit heavy, so it's not quite as portable as the K3 Pro would be. But at the very least, if you want something portable, I think go for the K3 Pro. For me personally, this is great because this is a keyboard that I just keep on my desk. The weight doesn't matter too much. I just love the height. It's a lot easier to use since I do have some wrist problems. And this is, I think I measured it at about half the height of the V1. So yeah, overall, I really like this keyboard. This is pretty good. Again, QMK via compatibility, the standard Keychron stuff. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. Peace.